Yo, what is up, everybody? It's Jay the Great here. Welcome back to another Naruto reaction video here today. And today we have yet another intriguing video of the Great Six, and as you can tell by the title, this is Itachi versus Hiruzen is not a fair fight. So, folks, I have personally seen within a Naruto fandom this topic brought up for discussion and/or debate many times, and rightfully so. We have two of some of the most top-tier individuals, specifically in Part 1 of Naruto. But going into this video, I would deduce that Itachi would most likely be the victor in this battle, because when comparing the two individuals and their feats against a common opponent, that opponent being Orochimaru, it is clear who had a better performance, right? Itachi, at the young age of 14, defeated Orochimaru so thoroughly and dominantly that Orochimaru didn't even dare to challenge Itachi again, and blatantly states it several times in Part 1, right? So that's Itachi's performance. Now we look at Hiruzen's. First of all, Orochimaru was willing to challenge Hiruzen, which already implies his level of confidence in comparison to his level of confidence in challenging Itachi, right? Clearly he's more confident going against Hiruzen than Itachi. Furthermore, the very fight itself, I would say, allows us to establish some level of arbitrary relativity between the two. Yes, he did have Edos, I'll give you that, but there was enough contentious moments where there was a clear, intangible tug-of-war going on between the two to establish some level of arbitrary relativity. Right? I think we can safely say that, at the least. You could argue whether he was stronger or weaker, but I think saying that they're relative is not far-fetched whatsoever. So, comparing these two individuals based off those performances and extrapolating what we can allows me to deduce that Itachi is more likely the superior. However, I am aware that some people try to make the argument that Itachi has a constant decrease in his ability due to his illness. That's fair. However, there is no way to truly quantify the exact rate of decrease. That's fair. However, what I will say is that Itachi, in his hypothetical prime, would more than likely defeat Hiruzen. I'm sure that most of you would agree with that. But either way, I am intrigued to see what Six has to say about this one and who he thinks is the victor in this one. But before we begin, and those really appreciate it, hit that like button, turn on bell notifications to stay updated with yours truly. And if you're new and you enjoy, man, you mess with the kid, make sure to hit that sub button, because once you do, you become part of the family forever. But let's not waste any more time, screen. Let's see what Six says about this one.
Itachi Uchiha versus Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage. This is one of the most heavily debated topics within Naruto, especially when it comes to part 1 of the series. But just because it's one of the most heavily debated topics doesn't mean it's also one of the most heavily contentious topics. As Agreed. I think by the end of the video, I think everybody will be pretty clear that one of these fighters is clearly superior to the other one. For this, I'll be looking at Itachi as he appeared in the series while alive, and since we don't know much about his illness, I'll basically be explaining how the fight goes for both a hypothetical healthy Itachi, as well as one of the ones we see dying of illness. As for Hiruzen, I'll be looking at him as he appeared during the beginning of the series as an old man. If you want to say Hiruzen can beat Itachi in his prime because he's the strongest Hokage, stronger than Hashirama or whatever, I really don't care, since he's obviously much stronger in his prime. And it's a little surprising how many people need to be reminded of that when discussing topics concerning Hiruzen. It's basically, if you think Hiruzen is stronger than Hashirama, then he obviously beats Itachi. And if you don't think Hiruzen is stronger than Hashirama, then he's just some vague amount stronger than he was as an old man, which we just cannot quantify, so there will be no point in discussing it no matter what. I'll be using information from both parts of the Naruto manga for this as well as the data books, but I'll be using a few things from the anime guys too. However, most of this will remain the same no matter what part of the series you choose to look at. I'm just going to get this out of the way now. This is going to be why Itachi would blatantly win this fight, and it would not be close.
Of course.
I'm only really touching on it due to the rampant misinformation throughout the community surrounding this matchup, and I think this would be a good opportunity to go over how strong Itachi is before my video on him comes out, which is going to be a very big one. With that being said, I also want to address some of the common misconceptions about Itachi's scaling before we get into this. A lot of people will often use Itachi's early showings in the series to try to downplay him. For example, his fight with Kakashi and Sasuke. However, they'll often forget and completely omit the fact that Itachi was blatantly holding back during both of these encounters.
Of course.
Back in part 1, when Itachi came to the village with Kisame and effortlessly washed the leaf Jonin, Kakashi even noted that he wasn't using his full power at multiple points in the fight, and later on in the anime, when Kisame asked him why they fled from Jiraiya in disbelief, Itachi thinks of only Sasuke. This is also supported by what Obito tells us later on in Shippuden, that Itachi only went to the village to scare Danzo into keeping his promise to stay away from Sasuke. With his last fight with Sasuke, Obito also tells us outright that Itachi held back against Sasuke and could have outright killed him at any time he wanted.
Of course.
With Zetsu questioning Itachi's performance as suspicious at multiple points during the fight, and Itachi was also on his deathbed at this point, so if anything, he should be at his weakest. So ultimately, these encounters cannot be used to downplay Itachi because they're not accurate reflections of his strength. So with that being said, let's get into how strong Itachi really is and why he beats old Hiruzen. The best and easiest way to compare these versions of Itachi and Hiruzen is through Orochimaru, who they both fought. While they both technically defeated Orochimaru, the context and portrayal surrounding these two encounters are completely different. Itachi, even upon his introduction to the series, was always portrayed as being significantly stronger than Orochimaru, with Orochimaru admitting complete inferiority to him and the databooks describing Itachi as being a whole other level as a ninja in every other aspect. This fear of Itachi mainly stems from their encounter before the series, where Orochimaru was forced to flee from the Akatsuki after his failure to steal Itachi's body. During this encounter, Itachi defeated Orochimaru with a single paralysis genjutsu the moment he stepped to him without even using his Mangekyo Sharingan. This short encounter left Orochimaru so scared of Itachi that he felt he needed to acquire an Uchiha body if he even wanted to challenge Itachi.
Correct.
So while Itachi is clearly superior to Orochimaru even without his Mangekyo Sharingan, the same cannot be said for Hiruzen. Hiruzen and Orochimaru's battle during Konoha Crush has always been portrayed as an even match, with almost every guide describing this fight as such. Some people like to be skeptical to which parts of the fight these statements are referring to, when they literally refer to moments throughout the entire battle, like numerous feats of Orochimaru and Hiruzen matching each other in strength, speed, ninjutsu, taijutsu, as well as the duration of the fight, which is said to be nearing an hour, which is virtually unheard of when it comes to fights between ninja. A lot of people also will try to use the fact that Hiruzen was holding back towards the beginning of the fight to dismiss most of this as Orochimaru just pressed a holding back or nerfed Hiruzen. However, they'll often ignore a lot of the other context surrounding this fight. For one, it's directly stated Orochimaru held back and was messing around during the fight in the second data book, so he was arguably holding back as well, except he never stopped. Hiruzen also got a resolve or mental amp towards the end of the fight.
Yep,
If you
a lot
watch
of
some
people
of my other
overlook that.
videos, you guys should already
That's
know
correct.
how significant those amps actually are. It's stated many times during part 1 that when protecting your loved ones, a shinobi can unleash their true strength and become as strong as they need to in order to accomplish their task. We see this many times when Naruto is backed into a corner and grows stronger out of a sense of resolve alone. And also in this fight with Hiruzen, Hiruzen puts everything on the line to protect the village, or as what people like to call his family, and defeats Orochimaru. Another important detail surrounding this fight that would support Orochimaru holding back is that the data books, along with numerous characters like Ebisu and Hiruzen himself, doubt that Hiruzen is even a match for Orochimaru, and even the first data book confirms Orochimaru is strong enough to outright declare he is superior to Hiruzen. So at the end of the day, even saying Hiruzen is a match for Orochimaru is pretty generous, where Itachi is clearly superior to Orochimaru. Itachi has a lot of dangerous abilities he could use to win this fight pretty quickly, even without his Mangekyo, whether it be ninjutsu or genjutsu. Itachi's fighting style, like most Uchiha, mainly revolves around his...
So, to Steelman 6's argument, and to reiterate my own premise before we started this video, Hiruzen and Orochimaru's battle allow us to establish some arbitrary level of relativity, right? 6 implies this, I said this earlier, and it's blatantly clear. What people like to do, which is fallacious and just incorrect logically speaking, is take a fight at face value and ignore the entire context around it. There are very nuanced details in some of these battles that are important to establish a more valid and accurate claim, right? Such as Orochimaru versus Hiruzen, right? A lot of people say Orochimaru was Hiruzen's pupil, hence Hiruzen held back the entire time. Incorrect. There was a point in the battle where Hiruzen most definitely receives a mental amp. He blatantly implies it with his statements, speaking of the will of fire, etc., and you could clearly tell his resolve increased significantly. And as we all know, mental amps are a commonality amongst individuals in battle in Naruto. Hence, this fight is more thorough than people think. right? And Six made a good observation with the databook statement implying that Orochimaru was just passing time with this fight and that it was just a boring pastime or something along those lines. Hence, you can even make the argument that Orochimaru is superior to Hiruzen. But however, admittedly, I will give Hiruzen the benefit of the doubt. He had to deal with Edo Tenseis. It's not like it was Orochimaru versus Hiruzen one-on-one the entirety of the match, right? So I'll give Hiruzen that. But either way, I'm sure Six agrees, and most of you agree with the premise that there is some arbitrary level of relativity between these two individuals, and there is not any level of arbitrary relativity between Itachi and Hiruzen. There's nothing to extrapolate from that fight to even remotely consider that possibility. It is disingenuous to do so, clearly, hence Itachi is clearly superior to Orochimaru and Hiruzen because of that reason. But let's continue on.
Masterful use of the Sharingan and ocular genjutsu. With his Sharingan, he can put targets under genjutsu with just a glance. With techniques like his demonic illusion shackle stakes, which he was able to use to successfully paralyze Orochimaru, who Hiruzen is no stronger than. Itachi can also mess with his targets and terrorize them and exhaust their minds with stuff like demonic illusion ephemeral, which he can cast just by pointing his finger at a target. This is also a good time to bring up a bad argument a lot of people like to make for Hiruzen concerning genjutsu. Some people like to assume things like he should be able to fight opponents by watching their feet like Guy, or can flex his chakra to break out since he knows quote unquote all techniques in the village. But these are skills, not techniques or jutsu, so that doesn't make too much sense. It's also been implied by Chiyo in the third data book that conventional means to break genjutsu do not work for ocular genjutsu, and that the only answers are either fleeing or having an ally free you from the genjutsu, neither of which will be options for Hiruzen here. Itachi also has one of the most skilled fire styles of all time, with the anniversary guide going as far as to say that even while holding back, Itachi's basic fire style burns hotter than anyone else. Like other members of the Uchiha clan, he shows a lot of skill in this area and can use many different fire style techniques like Fireball Jutsu, the Phoenix Flower Jutsu, or even alongside his Shuriken. Since he's already more powerful than Hiruzen and a more versatile fighter in this area, he should easily be able to overpower any of his fire style techniques with his own. Itachi is also proficient in the use of water style and can use techniques like Water Dragon or the Water Fang Bullet Jutsu, which the databook does say moves at the speed of light. Itachi also has many different supplementary techniques he can use in a battle like this. The Shadow Clone technique, which he can even use to make exploding clones, which would serve as a great distraction and deal a lot of splash damage. Itachi is also skilled with the Substitution Jutsu, which he can use to swap his body out for a flock of crows, which would also work as a great distraction against opponents like Hiruzen. So honestly, this is already enough for Itachi to beat Hiruzen, but I'd also like to go over his Mangekyo Sharingan so you guys get the bigger picture. With the Mangekyo Sharingan, or MS for short, Itachi along with his abilities gets much stronger and much more dangerous. It's stated directly in the databooks and novels that the Mangekyo Sharingan can do everything the regular Sharingan can do, but to a much greater degree. And this is even implied several times in the manga as well, like when A powered up in response to seeing Sasuke activate his MS, or when Madara attributes Sasuke's speed and moves to his Mangekyo Tomo specifically. So just by activating his MS, Itachi and his techniques would grow even stronger than when he was already superior to Orochimaru and Hiruzen, which was already without using any of his abilities. Itachi's MS gives him access to a few crazy abilities, mainly the Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu. Tsukuyomi is an ocular genjutsu that allows Itachi to completely torment his targets by manipulating all aspects of the genjutsu, even down to the target's perception of space and time. It's also so fast that the data book says even the speed of light is powerless against this technique. In the past, Itachi's even used this to kill targets like his girlfriend Izumi by forcing them to live out years in this genjutsu in a fraction of a second, completely shattering their minds. This psychological trauma is often so severe that while the actual illusion only lasts a few seconds, the trauma this target is forced to endure can exhaust them to the point that they fall into a coma, like what happened to Kakashi and Sasuke when Itachi was holding back on them. Unlike other genjutsu, Tsukuyomi also has specific conditions that need to be met in order for a target to break the illusion. Possessing Uchiha blood as well as the Sharingan, meaning Hiruzen has no out to Tsukuyomi. outside of trying to avoid eye contact, obviously, which via the scaling, he should be way too slow to do. Meaning the minute Itachi uses Tsukiyomi, the fight is over. Itachi can also use a Amaterasu, a powerful ninjutsu that lets him spawn black flames along the line of his sight. And unlike Sasuke, he can spawn his Amaterasu directly on the targets. The Amaterasu burns so hot that the data books say it's as hot as the sun and scorches all on heaven and earth, and that there is no escaping this technique. The flames are also so hot that Casey and Naruto wanted to avoid them based on prior memory, warning Killer B that if either of them got hit, they would instantly lose. So Itachi could easily take out Hiruzen with an Amaterasu or use it to overpower any of his elemental ninjutsu. The last and strongest ability Itachi can use with his MS is the Susanoo, which in Itachi's case, he has progressed to the armored stage. However, it's unlikely that Itachi would need to pull out this technique in this fight in specific, as it's more of a trump card in his own words. The Susanoo is an ethereal warrior made out of chakra that, as its name suggests, protects the user at all costs. The Susanoo is also much stronger and faster than Itachi himself, and is directly suggested by multiple statements and feats within the manga concerning the Susanoo that it is, in fact, this strong. Itachi's Susanoo is also equipped with special spirit weapons, the Tosuka Blade and Yadamir, which are both insanely busted and make Zetsu wonder if Itachi is completely invincible. With the Tosuka Blade, Itachi can seal away the soul of any target he pierces into an eternal illusion. With the Yadamir, Itachi can block virtually any attack with the shield and alter its composition to counter any oncoming attacks with the opposing element. So basically, if Itachi is really feeling demonic and decides to use this Susanoo, he can easily seal away Hiruzen with the Tosuka Blade or block any of his attacks with the Yadamir. While the MS does not put a significant strain on Itachi's stamina, it wouldn't really matter in this fight if he does use the Susanoo, even while at his weakest. While literally blind, Itachi still hoed Orochimaru and his Hydra with this Susanoo, cutting off all of its heads before blitzing him with the Tosuka Blade, with the weekly manga describing this scene as Itachi ending Orochimaru's ambition once and for all with just a flick of his wrist. This is really bad for Hiruzen, considering the fact that the third data book tells us Orochimaru became stronger than ever before with this technique, also calling it his most powerful jutsu ever. This means if Itachi uses his Susanoo, he'd have an easier time with Hiruzen and Enma, and they would be no diffed just like Orochimaru. Which, keep in mind, he did while he was fatigued and at the point of literal blindness. And Hiruzen also doesn't have anything to brag about when it comes to the stamina either, seeing as outside of his mental imp, Hiruzen got tired after wielding Enma for just one page, so he'd be in no position to exploit Itachi's stamina in any case. The last thing I want to go over before I wrap this video up are Hiruzen's abilities and basically how Itachi would go about countering them. However, since the Hiruzen loses by a pretty clear margin, they aren't very relevant, so I won't dwell on them outside of the very important ones. While Hiruzen was renowned as the Professor for having learned and mastered every technique in Konoha, this won't really help him much in this fight. With the Sharingan, Itachi can analyze, break down, or even copy any technique Hiruzen would ever use, whether it's just elemental jutsu or something more complex like shadow possession. I also want to take some time here to specifically address an argument against Uchiha I've been seeing floating around lately. The Bringer of Darkness technique, a blinding genjutsu that Hiruzen may be able to use, since the Sharingan sees through basic genjutsu just like it does with ninjutsu and taijutsu. Therefore, this technique would be completely useless against Uchiha, as they could use the Sharingan to easily break out, and in Itachi's case, he can even reflect the genjutsu back towards Hiruzen like he did with Kurenai.
Good point.
Another important point to bring up in this fight is that while Hiruzen can summon Enma or transform him into a staff to assist him in battle, however, this also won't matter here, as the data books indicate that Enma is no stronger than Old Man Hiruzen, and while he can be used for distractions, even Orochimaru can keep up with him when he's used this way, which we've already established Itachi is much stronger than him. While in his younger days, Hiruzen was known for using shadow clones, these will also not be an option here due to the fact that, as I implied before, it's stated many times that shadow clones are a risk to Hiruzen's health, and at his old age, simply making 2 of them can even shorten his lifespan. And Itachi can also use better and more versatile versions of this technique, like exploding clones or crow clones. so there isn't really anything Hiruzen has in his arsenal that he could use to get a one-up on Itachi. So while Hiruzen is one of the strongest Kages ever, and one of the strongest characters within the series period, no matter how you look at it, he loses to Itachi here. Itachi, even without using his MS or more than one technique, was already far superior to Orochimaru, who went toe-to-toe with old Hiruzen and is implied to be superior to him. With his MS, the fight just becomes a complete slaughter, and there's absolutely nothing Hiruzen could ever do to break the Tsukuyomi, block a Matarasu, or stop Itachi Susanoo. As always, I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and if you want to see
great scaling,
Naruto
great scaling, great logic
this,
in this one.
Make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe, and comment down below telling me who you think wins. And other than that, have a nice day.
All right, I definitely want to give my take on this. Great scaling in video by 6, by the way. Great observations, great extrapolations from the canonical literature, etc. So I basically completely agree with 6 here. My premise was basically the same here coming into this video. Itachi just has an abundance of empirical evidence for him to suggest that he is blatantly superior to Old Man Hiruzen, and the Old Man Hiruzen that fought Orochimaru specifically. He wasn't even using his MS to blatantly humiliate and dominate Orochimaru to the point where he never even dared to challenge him until he had an Uchiha body. Right? That's how badly he beat Orochimaru. That's how badly he dominated Orochimaru at 14 without even using an MS ability. That is extremely impressive, and that cannot be overlooked. That establishes a blatant, significant superiority to an extreme degree. For someone not to even want to challenge you again, due to them being terrified of your ability, implies blatant superiority. The feat itself and the after effect imply blatant superiority for Itachi. Now, Orochimaru versus Hiruzen is much more contentious. There's contentious aspects still discussed to this day, like if they were relative, if they were equal, who was actually stronger than the other. But there are data book statements to suggest that Orochimaru thought this wasn't the most exciting of battles, and that Hiruzen got a mental amp due to his will of fire, right? So, in fact, there's even arguments for Orochimaru being stronger than Hiruzen. I think that's debatable, to be fair, but again, like I said several times, it clearly establishes an arbitrary level of relativity between the two, despite who you think is more powerful. And the fact that they're relative, to any degree, clearly indicates that Itachi would triumph over Hiruzen. That is clear as day. If he uses MS, which substantially increases his tangible aspects, speed, AP, etc., Hiruzen would be at Itachi's mercy. Itachi uses one genjutsu with the MS, Hiruzen is done for. Not only would he be able not to break out, he wouldn't react in time to even avoid the genjutsu. He is not fast enough to do that. He's not. Itachi, from Orochimaru's perspective, we can safely say, damn near instantaneously genjutsu'd him with his base Sharingan at 14. That's what he did. It was so quick that it traumatized Orochimaru. It'd be no different for Hiruzen. Despite all his knowledge, despite being the professor of Konoha, that would all be trivial. It wouldn't matter. Hiruzen would die very quickly. Very quickly. Itachi could basically pick his poison, so to speak, against Hiruzen. He's blatantly superior to Hiruzen, right? So what this illuminates is that despite, like Six said, despite debates being common amongst the fandom, many of these debate topics are not contentious whatsoever. A good example is Kakuzu versus Pain. Clearly not contentious. It's more of a troll topic, and even though this isn't a troll topic, I would say, the notion still applies. It's not contentious. It really is not. There is not an adequate level of relativity between the two to consider this topic contentious. So if you're well versed in the canonical literature and in logic, you can clearly establish Itachi's superiority. Clearly. Right? You can clearly establish that he's a superior being and a superior shinobi to Hiruzen. Now, like Six said as well, if we're talking about prime Hiruzen, fine. If you presuppose that he was stronger than fucking Hashirama, then he clearly dominates Itachi. If he was even stronger than Hashirama, clearly he would win. He'd be faster, his AP would be overwhelming, etc. He would be a broken individual. So if you presuppose that, in his prime, fine. But Old Man Hiruzen more than likely gets slaughtered by Itachi, even in base. Even in base. he probably would lose. Itachi probably wouldn't even have to use his MS, to be quite honest. So this was a good video, and Six did a good job of clearly illuminating the difference in the gap in power between Itachi and Hiruzen. Overall, it was very well done. Very good observations, very good logic, etc. And I completely agree. I completely agree. There is just way too much in Itachi's favor, empirically and rationally, to where it's very, very blatant what the conclusion is to this one. If you were to argue for Hiruzen, you'd have to make some far-fetched assumptions. You'd have to make some borderline disingenuous or just blatantly disingenuous claims to even suggest Hiruzen won't have a chance against Itachi as an old man. There is nothing for him empirically. It would all have to be rational arguments embedded with speculation and fallacious arguments. It's the only way you can make a case for Hiruzen, which would be a very bad one, I would say, against even a decent debater. So there you guys have it, folks. That's my thoughts on this. Six hit it right on the nail with who would most likely win this one. It's clear as day. I mean, I'm sure most of you guys know that or knew that already. But let me know in the comment section below anyway what you guys think. Maybe you think it's closer. Maybe you have a case for your Hiruzen winning. Whatever the case may be, I'm always interested to hear you guys' opinions. So please leave them down below, and I'll catch you in the next video. He's Jay the Great signing out. Peace.